What trends are we seeing now in 2026 for EB-1As? Fortunately, they're not great. At the end of 2024 and going into early 2025, we saw really negative trends on NIW petitions. And those negative trends just meant that the government was being a little bit more arbitrary. So you might file a case and you would have less confidence in knowing whether or not that case would be approved in the end. The same is true now in early 2026. So it took a while for them to adopt that same trend on EB-1As, but at the end of 2025 and going into the beginning of 2026, we're definitely seeing the same thing in EB-1As. And it's very puzzling because I can submit a case that is decent. I always submit decent cases, people that are approved and can meet the criteria and have a decent claim to final merit. But I can submit a weaker case, one that I know some officers at USCIS would not accept, while others would accept it. So I might give them a 50% chance of approval or a 65% chance of approval. Again, the merits are there, but I know according to the officers that I've encountered at USCIS that some would just not accept the argument. That case might be easily approved and sail through. Again, if I gave them the 50 to 65% chance, that's reasonable. It's a reasonable outcome, a reasonable result. A lot of officers would approve it. But I can submit another case the same week where I think this is almost a slam dunk case. 95% chance of approval or higher. The final merits are pretty much undeniable. And USCIS can still figure out some kind of issue to take with the merits of the case. And that's really where we're seeing the more arbitrary decisions come in, at the final merit stage. The USCIS is questioning some odd things on the criteria here or there, where they're bringing in arguments or questions or points that they were using maybe 10 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, and then they stopped questioning these things because it was pretty well established that these weren't reasonable questions, but now they're bringing them back. So there's some frustration there on the criteria front as well, but the vast majority of issues that we're seeing in the cases stem from final merits. In my view, USCIS is not applying final merits correctly. They even include in some of their notices of intent to deny or their RFEs phrases that show they're using an interpretation that is contrary to congressional intent. It shows that they are applying a higher standard than what Congress authorized them to apply. I think these cases are really great for litigation. In the end, though, most people choose to refile just because if the case is really, really strong, the next officer to review it is likely to see that and is likely to approve it. But there can be merits to either strategy, refiling or litigation. There was a recent announcement just this week on litigation. One of the really good litigators in business immigration got a decision from a U.S. District Court judge in Nebraska, essentially saying that the application of that second level final merit standard is illegal because USCIS adopted that into the law without following the proper notice and comment process that's required under administrative law. So it's a really good victory. I will say it hasn't changed USCIS policy yet. As a policy, all of the officers are still being instructed to use the final merit standard. I think for them to change their policy, this is going to need to go further in the litigation process. So it would need to be decided by the circuit courts and probably multiple circuit courts across the country. So it's really, really good news, and I've seen a lot of celebrating on social media. But when it comes to your case, your EB-1 case, just know that USCIS is still looking at the final merits, and they are unfortunately applying a really arbitrary standard when doing so. Those are the main trends. Some odd trends. I'll probably put out some videos in the next few days here about specific trends we're seeing on judge of the work of others, authorship, media, and membership. Because there are some interesting things that are happening, like I said, where USCIS is kind of relying on questions that it used to ask a decade ago and then decided that those weren't good questions to ask and now they're bringing them back. It's pretty frustrating to have to kind of re-adjudicate those things. So those will be interesting videos for everybody, but keep in mind, final merits is where it's at. Final merits is really where you need to win your case, and it's not something to take lightly in this particular era of adjudication at USCIS.